This is the lecture for Ancient and Medieval History for Tuesday, the 13th of April, 2021, and we are talking about Saint Benedict and his rule and the Benedictine Monasteries. Now, Benedict's involvement in important things includes establishing an order that's going to produce some of the most important popes of the Middle Ages. For example, Pope Gregory the Great, who is more important than anyone else in establishing the importance of the papacy, which is the Bishop of Rome, and his authority over the rest of the Western Christian Church, is a Benedictine monk. He also becomes the Pope. Gregory is responsible for establishing the kind of music, which is the earliest music in the West that we know about. We don't know what the Greeks and Romans listened to. We guess, but we don't really know. We know what medieval churchmen sang because we have the Gregorian chants, named after and in honor of Pope Gregory the Great. So, the Benedictines have an important role in that many of the great, important, influential churchmen, including the advisors to many kings, happen to be Benedictine monks. And the reason that they are so involved is because they are hard workers, organized, and they are promoted to jobs like this based on not on birth, but on ability. Now, of course, having a high birth means you're going to go into the monastery probably with the ability to read and write, which is important in those days. But if you're lowborn and smart, you can become very, very successful. Doesn't that violate something I said yesterday? Well, it's not success for you so much. Pope Gregory the Great, and you should write this down, Gregory called himself the servant of the servants of God. The servant of the servants of God. And that quote is still probably the most prized title that the Pope has. Today, Pope Francis is the servant of the servants of God. Before him, Pope Benedict was the servant of the servants of God. Think about what Jesus had said. Jesus says that it is he who serves that's important. Jesus himself kneels down in front of his followers. And in a Middle Eastern country, which is a desert country where feet stink on ice, he cleans their feet, bathing them in precious oil, showing his humility, showing that the most important person in the room is not the master. It's the servant. It's the one who gives. So, servant of the servant of God, servants of God. It's a Gregorian monk that comes up with that. A Benedictine monk. But, in addition to being a place where people can go find a way to live together with God, in addition to being very productive places, hospitals, producers of important products, the Benedictine monasteries do a job, as do other monasteries, that's very hard for us to understand. Books had been destroyed profligately during the fall of the Western Roman Empire. When people are dying because of the collapse of the economy and the collapse of society and the wars that are happening between the various barbarian folk Wanderungs. The truth is that preserving books is pretty low on the priority list. It's part of a dark age. You de-emphasize the value of things like books. If suddenly aliens were to attack us, would the first impulse that you have be to go pick up your comic collection or your video game collection or your library? Most people wouldn't. They'd save the people in their lives if they could, or they'd save themselves. A lot of books end up in monasteries. The monasteries try to collect them. If people wish to give, giving in the form of books is a good way to do that. And what the monks begin to do is something so bizarre. You see, the Christian church is going to keep the ancient Greek and Roman knowledge alive in a different way than anyone else. The Byzantines are going to keep the ancient Greek and Roman knowledge alive by being Romans. But they are Romans that are slowly dying and slowly fading, and it's depressing. You will learn that the Islamic Arabs are going to keep the ancient knowledge alive by using it and expanding it. There's a reason why most stars in the visible sky are named with Arab names: Rigel, Alioth, Alhena, Aldebaran, so forth. The Christian church, during the Dark Ages, is going to keep the knowledge alive in seed form. Now look at a seed. You are all familiar with apple seeds because you eat apples. Presumably, if you don't eat them today, you have eaten them in the past. And in the core of an apple are a bunch of little dark black hunks of wood that we call seeds. If you were just to see those seeds in the absence of any context, in other words, no apple, just a pile of seeds, or a cup of seeds, or a jar of seeds, what existence does a seed have in the present? It's a little wood-like piece, a little tablet, a little lozenge. If you're hungry, I suppose you could eat it. It'll give you an upset stomach if you eat enough apple seeds, and it won't really give you much nutrition because there's not much there. It's a little bitty seed. It's a potentiality. It isn't an existent thing fully yet. It's the potential of what might come. Only when the seed is planted properly in good soil, with water and sunlight and care and the right conditions, will that seed fulfill its potential. You might have all the potential in the world. You might be brilliant. You might have skills and talents in art or music. You might be a natural scholar. You might be a natural historian. You might be a natural artist or musician. You could be a comedian in the making that could make yourself famous around the world. But if you don't work at it, if you don't try to make yourself a better artist, a better musician, a better comedian, if you don't challenge yourself, if you don't push yourself beyond your comfort level, your potential will wither and die. You owe it to yourself, if you have talent, to take an interest in that talent. Not because your mom and dad want you to do, not because somebody wants you to do it who's in school, but because that's something that's been given to you. If you're a natural athlete or a natural dancer or whatever, take that talent and develop it. Make something of it so that you can have the opportunity to do something few people can do. Fully actualize your talents. Take the seed, of potential that's in you and make something of it. Now, who the heck am I to tell you this? Most people in the teaching profession are disappointed because they wanted to do something else with their life. I'm telling you the truth. It's not so true here at this school, but it's true at most of the schools I've been to as a student and as a teacher. They're frustrated artists or novelists. They're frustrated athletes. They're whatever. They settled for teaching. Not me. Not me. As silly as it may sound, what talents I have had, and I've developed. And you may not see it, and I'm not trying to toot my own horn. I'm not a great history teacher for everyone, and I'm not great at everything. I'm a mediocre AP history teacher because I don't like AP. But I do know this. Few people can do what I do the way I do it. I've taken the talents I have, I've developed them, and I've become the best teacher I can be of history. Those of you who had me for civics last year, I was not the same person because civics isn't my focus. History is. Whether it seems silly to you or not, I'm a happy man because I've developed the talents that I've had and I'm doing something that I think is useful. May you be as fortunate to find what you're good at, to find something that you think is worth doing, and to have the opportunity to develop those talents, not only so that you can earn a living at it, but so that you can do things with your life that you're proud of. That's a rare thing. That's as rare as true love. I'm telling you, you all have potential. No doubt you've had people in your life tell you that. But if you do nothing with it, you'll squander it. You'll waste it. And that won't, the person that will feel that waste is you. Your future self will look back and say, why didn't I do that? Why didn't I do something with that? I could have been something. I could have done something. The knowledge in books that the monks get a hold of is in a language that fewer and fewer people outside of monasteries are speaking. The language of these scrolls, these Greek and Roman books, is Greek, which people in the West don't speak very often, and a form of Latin that's becoming more and more and more archaic. If you were to listen to the language people spoke in the streets in Shakespeare's time 500 years ago, 400 years ago, you wouldn't be able to understand them. Not much. There'd be a few words you could get. You might get the gist of it. If you knew Dutch or German, you'd have a better chance. But the truth is, it's a different language. In 400 to 500 years, the language has shifted. It's become different. Language always does. So the books are in a language that over time is less and less scrutable, less and less discernible, less and less readable by the monks. And what world do these books describe? The Rome of Augustus? The Athens of Socrates? What possible connection could an Anglo-Saxon monk in an isolated monastery on an island off the coast of Britain, how could they possibly even imagine what it was like to live in Augustan Rome or Socrates' Athens? To live in a society that traded with everything in the known world. A city with people from all over the world. A city of tens or hundreds of thousands of people. When the monk himself has probably seen no settlement with more than 400 or 500 people in them. Who has always lived in the countryside, who has never seen a city, who's never imagined what it would be like to travel. Because the only people who travel are scary, hairy barbarians. The books that have been collected and are being collected by the monasteries are about things that the monks don't understand. And sometimes they're in languages that the monks don't understand. And yet, most monasteries that have books devote certain monks to the scriptorium, a special operation whereby ancient scrolls are copied by hand into medieval folios. What we call a book is properly a folio. It's got a spine, it's got covers, it's a folio. The ancients didn't use folios, they used scrolls. But in medieval times, the more extensive and tough folio book is developed. So monks, year after year, generation after generation, have to scrutinize these old scrolls, which aren't necessarily easy to read. Some of these scrolls have writing over other writing, because the ancients would sort of cross something out and write something new in its same place. And they've got to figure out what these books are and what they say and copy them. But some of the people copying these books didn't understand them. They didn't understand the concepts in them. They didn't understand the settings in them. They even didn't understand the language beyond a certain point. But you can copy. In the 1970s, one of the biggest rock groups in the United States was a group called ABBA, A-B-B-A. They had 70 songs that you may have heard of on some oldies hit parade. When they started as world-famous singers, singing English lyrics, not one of them spoke English. The only language they spoke was Swedish. They learned to sing in English by memorization and by sound. They were not singing words they understood. Now, over time, they all became somewhat conversant, but it took years. So for the first few years, these people are going on world tours to rock, full stadiums, singing, belting their hearts out, singing in a language they didn't understand. If you're good, you can copy. So a lot of the monks who didn't understand what they were doing, didn't understand what the books were about, could at least copy the shapes and symbols. But when interpretation was needed, mistakes could happen. Why would they do this? Why would a person spend part of their one and only life, even if they're in a monastery, why would they sit and painstakingly copy these moldy old scrolls into books? That's the hope. You've got it. The hope is that even though they're useless in the present, like seeds, in the future, a situation may occur by God's grace whereby these books will be useful and important. We are preserving the knowledge of a world we never knew for a future time we will never see in seed form. And we will dedicate our lives to it as service to God. How would you feel if a goodly portion of your awake life was spent copying down shapes and forms from some alien ruin that you don't understand, but it needs to be translated onto paper? Or, this is a more modern thing, somebody found some alien or some ancient records on moldering scripts, and you've got to somehow enter the shapes into a digital medium. You've got to take the book or the scroll or the stone wall with bas-reliefs and symbols on it and somehow find a way to enter it into a computer. And one of the first things you're going to have to do is develop keys for each of those symbols, because the keys we have and the symbols we have don't work. So you're going to have to do an essential reprogram. And what if it's a language like Chinese or ancient Egyptian, where there aren't a small number of phonetic symbols, but instead where there are hundreds of thousands of symbols representing all the different words? You know how long that would take? It would take lifetimes. Putting it into a computer form that nobody that you know would be interested in. They did something that made no sense to them. It didn't make their lives better. It was an act of faith that God would find a use for them in the future, in His good time. And as an act of faith, they did more with it than simply copy. They created what you see on my tie, Illuminated Manuscripts, which are books that are hand copied with great care, with pictures, with colors, with abstract geometrical designs, with pictures of birds and animals, with all sorts of things like that, to bring out what they could understand in the text, to make it a work of art, to make it beautiful. They did this, again, not for themselves, but for the ages. So, let's take a look at the products of a particular monastery in the north of Britain called Lindisfarne. Miss Anderson, would you be kind enough, please, to shut the lights? Thank you. Okay. First, I'm going to just show you what this...
Well, we need to turn that video off.
Yeah, I know. So we're just going to take a look at some of the... Thank you for letting me know, though. And it doesn't look like it's on there. At some of the pictures. And I think what I'm going to do, because I'm going to be showing things, even though the screen is sort of whited out, I'll come back with a second video.